Rain falls hard over the cemetery, soaking the black umbrellas and the faces beneath them. Cassandra stands apart from the crowd, her coat clinging to her body, one hand pressed against her swollen belly. Mud gathers at her shoes as the casket sinks slowly into the ground. Her cousins whisper nearby, soft laughter carried by the wind, their eyes sharp, waiting for the reading of the will. She doesn't look at them. She only stares at the iron key the lawyer just placed in her trembling hand, cold and heavy, its surface carved with strange markings. No mansion, no money, just a forgotten cabin in the woods. A drop of rain slides down her cheek, though she isn't sure if it's rain or a tear. What kind of woman leaves her granddaughter a key to nowhere? What secret was she meant to unlock? Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Stay tuned, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The road narrowed as Cassandra left the last town behind. Her old car hummed through miles of empty countryside, headlights slicing through the mist. Trees leaned inward as if whispering to each other, their branches heavy with rain. The radio flickered in and out, a voice half heard, then swallowed by static. She switched it off and let the silence take over. On the seat beside her lay a worn duffel bag, a folded baby blanket, and the letter with her grandmother's signature. Every bump in the road made the key in her pocket shift and clink softly, a steady reminder that she owned something no one wanted. The gas light blinked. Cassandra rubbed her belly, whispering, "We'll be fine, sweetheart. Just a little further." The valley deepened, the fog growing thicker. Old barns collapsed into the fields like forgotten memories. Fences broke off into nothing. The world seemed suspended between dusk and night. As the hills rose higher, her thoughts drifted backward, to the day everything fell apart. She had been 6 months pregnant when Daniel packed his bags. He'd said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he needed time to think. Time turned into silence, and silence turned into absence. The rent came due, the calls from her landlord turned cold, and soon she found herself in her grandmother's house, a place filled with memories but no comfort. Her grandmother had always been a quiet woman, but strong in a way few people understood. Cassandra remembered watching her walk the orchard in her shawl at dawn, whispering things to the wind. At the time, it had seemed strange. Old habits, she'd thought. Now, it felt like something she was supposed to remember. Lightning flashed far ahead. Cassandra blinked through the rain-smeared windshield. The road twisted sharply around a ridge, opening into a stretch of forest so dense it swallowed the last light of day. She slowed the car, heart thudding. The GPS screen glowed blank. No signal, no route. The air felt colder, damp against her skin. A faded sign stood half-hidden by vines. Birch Hollow Road. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Guess we're here," she murmured. The tires crunched over gravel, water splashing in shallow puddles. The forest pressed close, a maze of dark trunks and drifting fog. Every few seconds, she caught the faint scent of pine and wet earth. When she finally saw it, the cabin looked small, smaller than she remembered from the one photograph her grandmother had shown her years ago. It crouched between tall birch trees, its roof bowed under moss, its chimney leaning slightly to one side. Her breath fogged the glass. "Home," she whispered softly, though the word trembled. The car engine sputtered, then died. Cassandra sat for a long moment, hands on her lap, listening to the sound of rain striking the roof. It was quiet enough that she could hear her own heartbeat, steady and uncertain. She stepped out into the rain, the cold biting through her coat. The mud gave under her boots as she crossed to the porch. The air smelled like cedar, wood smoke, and something faintly sweet. Wildflowers maybe, though she saw none. The steps creaked under her weight. The porch boards were warped, but solid. Her grandmother's old rocking chair sat in one corner, a thin layer of water pooling on its seat. Cassandra ran her fingers along the railing, tracing grooves in the wood, initials carved there long ago, EM 1947. Her heart stung at the sight. "Eleanor Monroe," she whispered. "You really did leave me something, didn't you?" She pulled the iron key from her pocket. Its surface was colder than the rain, and tiny etchings glimmered faintly along its spine, markings she hadn't noticed before. They almost looked like vines or roots. The lock resisted at first, stiff from years of neglect. She twisted harder, and with a click that sounded too loud in the quiet, the door opened. A faint golden light spread from inside, not from a bulb, but from somewhere deeper in the room. The air that greeted her was warm and dry, carrying the scent of ash, lavender, and old cedar. Cassandra hesitated on the threshold. "Is someone here?" she called softly. No answer. Only the soft patter of rain behind her. She stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under her shoes, but they held. The fire in the stone hearth flickered lazily, though no logs seemed freshly placed. On the table nearby sat a single envelope sealed in deep green wax. Her name stretched across the front in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. For Cassandra. She didn't open it yet. Instead, she stood in the middle of the room, taking in the space that seemed both familiar and strange. The walls glowed in the firelight, carved with patterns that looked like vines and waves. A kettle sat warm on the stove, though there was no sign of anyone around. Her fingers brushed the back of a wooden chair. Smooth, polished, recently used. A shiver ran through her, not fear exactly, but the feeling of being noticed. Behind her, the door swung shut on its own, the latch clicking firmly into place. The sound echoed softly through the small cabin. Cassandra exhaled, her breath shaking. "All right," she whispered, forcing a small laugh. "Guess you really wanted me here." She sat at the table, the envelope in her hands. The wax broke cleanly under her thumb, and the folded paper inside released the faint scent of dried herbs. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the page, steady, confident, every word deliberate. "My dearest girl, if you are reading this, it means you've found your way home. The others inherited what they desired. You inherited what you need. This land remembers its keeper, even when people forget their place within it." Her throat tightened as she read. "The cabin will not harm you. It will shelter you, as it has sheltered generations of women before you. Trust what it shows you. When the time comes, you will understand." A log cracked in the fire. Sparks lifted like tiny stars. Cassandra lowered the letter and stared into the flames. The warmth seeped through her, loosening the ache in her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She turned her head toward the window. Outside, the forest swayed gently under the moonlight, and through the mist, she thought she saw faint glimmers, like soft lanterns weaving between the trees. She blinked. They were gone. The baby kicked. Once. Firm and certain. Cassandra placed a hand over her stomach. "I know," she whispered. "You feel it too." She looked around the cabin again. The fire, the carved beams, the soft hum of the wind through the chimney, and for a moment, the loneliness that had followed her since the funeral eased. Still, a quiet question pressed at the edge of her thoughts. Why had her grandmother written, "When the time comes, you will understand"? And what exactly was she supposed to understand? The fire burned lower as the night settled. The sound of rain softened to a steady whisper on the roof. Cassandra sat in the wooden chair for a long time, still holding the letter. The air carried a faint warmth that didn't seem to come from the hearth alone. She walked slowly through the cabin, her hand brushing the walls as she moved. Each plank was smooth beneath her fingers, as though it had been sanded just yesterday. Dust should have coated everything, but the place was spotless. Someone, or something, had kept it ready. A lamp stood on a small table by the window. Its base was brass, engraved with curling vines and a small symbol shaped like a circle crossed with roots. Cassandra turned the switch. The flame flickered once, then steadied, casting a golden glow that filled the room with calm. The glow revealed small details she hadn't noticed before. A line of herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, dried lavender and thyme tied with red string. The scent filled her lungs, soft and comforting. On the mantel above the hearth sat a framed photograph. Her grandmother stood in front of this same cabin, her smile gentle but knowing, eyes bright with some hidden thought. Cassandra traced the edge of the frame. "You knew I'd come, didn't you?" she whispered. The fire popped sharply in response. She startled, then laughed quietly to herself. "Talking to fireplaces now," she muttered, shaking her head. But the laughter didn't hide her unease. The silence around her felt alive, listening. She checked the pantry. Every shelf was stocked, glass jars filled with beans, rice, and grains, baskets of herbs, even sealed bottles of clean water. None of it made sense. The cabin was supposed to have been abandoned for years. She opened a drawer near the sink and found a folded quilt inside, its edges embroidered with the same root-shaped symbol she'd seen on the lamp. Beneath it lay a small silver bell, its handle carved with initials, E.M. Her grandmother's. Cassandra held the bell up to the light. The metal was warm to the touch. The baby kicked again, harder this time. "All right," she said softly. "Maybe you're trying to tell me something." She took the quilt to the old armchair and wrapped it around herself. The moment the fabric touched her skin, a wave of calm swept over her, easing the tension in her shoulders. She hadn't realized how tired she was until now. The storm outside faded into distant thunder. Her eyes grew heavy, but just before sleep claimed her, a faint hum reached her ears, low and melodic, like a lullaby sung from somewhere deep within the walls. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the chair. She was standing barefoot in a moonlit forest. The air shimmered silver. A mist curled through the birch trees, their white trunks glowing like bones of light. Her grandmother stood ahead, wearing the same shawl she used to wear on cold mornings. "You came," she said softly. Cassandra stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I didn't know where else to go." The older woman smiled. "You were never lost. This place remembers you. It always has." She reached out, brushing Cassandra's cheek with her hand. "The cabin will keep you safe. But safety isn't the same as hiding. When the storm comes, you'll understand what must be done." Cassandra tried to ask what that meant, but her grandmother was already fading into the mist. The air rippled, the trees bowed, and the world dissolved. She woke with a start, back in the armchair. The fire still glowed, the quilt still wrapped around her shoulders. Her breathing came fast. A dream, she told herself. Just a dream. But the lamp by the window burned brighter than before, its light pulsing in a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. Cassandra rose, moving closer. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Beyond it, she saw something impossible. Faint orbs of light floating among the trees, drifting in patterns, almost like they were watching the cabin. The wind picked up, rattling the window panes, though the air inside stayed still. "Okay," she whispered, voice shaking slightly. "I get it. You're trying to tell me something." She opened the letter again, reading the lines she had skimmed before. "This land remembers its keeper. Do not fear what you see or hear. You will know the difference between danger and welcome when the moment comes." She lowered the page slowly. "So you knew this would happen." The fire brightened again, responding like a nod. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can do this alone." The baby shifted gently, as if answering. She exhaled and sat down again, staring into the flames. Hours passed. The storm outside faded completely. The forest beyond the windows glowed softly under the moonlight. The cabin, once unfamiliar, began to feel strangely alive, like a heartbeat she could almost hear beneath the floor. She rose and walked through the small hallway that led to the bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing a space both simple and warm. A handmade bed with a wool blanket, a cradle in the corner carved from cherrywood, and a dresser topped with a single candle already lit. The candle's flame leaned toward her as she entered, stretching thin like it recognized her. She reached out and touched the cradle. The wood felt smooth and recently polished. Her grandmother's handwriting was carved faintly into one side. "For the next keeper." Cassandra sat on the bed, the letter still in her hand. Her grandmother's words echoed in her head. "You inherited what you need." She turned the key over in her fingers, watching the firelight reflect off the metal. For a second, she thought she saw movement beneath its surface, tiny lines glowing like veins. Her pulse quickened. She blinked, and the glow vanished. The lamp by the window dimmed, then brightened again. Slow, steady, almost like breathing. Cassandra whispered, "Are you alive?" The walls creaked in reply, not sharply, but with a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. A quiet smile touched her lips. "I guess that's a yes." The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest trace of a familiar scent, lilac, her grandmother's favorite. Cassandra leaned back on the bed, exhaustion washing over her. The candle's flame flickered blue for a moment, then steadied. The cabin seemed to sigh around her, settling into silence. As her eyes closed, her grandmother's voice returned in her mind, clear as if she were in the room. "This place kept me safe. Now it will keep you." The last thing she saw before sleep took her was the light from the lamp stretching across the floor, a soft, living glow that pulsed once more before fading into the dark. Cassandra woke to a quiet morning wrapped in soft light. The storm was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost heavy. Through the window, fog drifted above the trees like pale smoke, curling between branches. The cabin was warmer than she remembered, though the fire had burned down to embers. For a long time, she didn't move. The baby shifted gently inside her, a small kick that reminded her she wasn't truly alone. She rose, pulling on her sweater, and wandered to the table where her grandmother's letter still lay. The ink shimmered faintly in the morning light, as if freshly written. Cassandra ran her thumb across the words. The others inherited what they desired. A sound caught her attention, a faint creak from somewhere deeper in the house. She turned. The hallway door swayed slightly, though no wind touched it. Her heart quickened. She pushed it open and found a narrow storage room she hadn't noticed before. Dust hung in the air, but everything inside looked clean. Shelves lined the walls, each holding something thoughtful. Folded quilts, tins of honey, candles, even a small stack of books bound in leather. On the lowest shelf sat a box carved with the same symbol from the lamp and quilt. Cassandra hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were tools, a hammer, nails, a pocketknife, and beneath them, a folded piece of parchment. She unfolded it carefully. It was a map. The edges were frayed, but the ink was clear, a sketch of the land around the cabin. It showed a stream, a grove of birches, and an X marked not far from the porch. Cassandra traced the path with her finger. "What were you hiding out there?" she whispered. She decided to find out. Outside, the forest was quiet, the ground damp from the night's rain. The air smelled of pine and wet soil. She followed the map's markings, stepping carefully between roots. Birds watched her from the branches but didn't move. When she reached the grove, she saw it, a small mound of earth covered in moss, with a flat stone at the top. Kneeling, she brushed the moss away. Faint letters appeared, EM 1947. Her grandmother's initials again. She sat back, confused. The date was decades before her grandmother's death. What had been buried here? She dug gently with her hands until her fingers touched something solid, a small, rusted tin box. The lid gave way easily. Inside were several folded pages tied with string. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and herbs. She opened the first one. The handwriting wasn't her grandmother's. It was older. March 2nd, 1910. The cabin is restless tonight. The trees whisper warnings I cannot yet understand. But I feel it. The bond is passing to me. I am afraid and honored all at once. Another page. April 12th, 1910. The birth came early. The storm was strong. Yet the child lived, and the land calmed. The pattern continues. Cassandra's chest tightened. These weren't random writings. They were journal entries. Her ancestors had written them. Each woman recorded her own experiences with this place, as if the cabin itself had guided their hands. She flipped through page after page, names repeating over the decades. Hannah, Ruth, Eleanor. Each spoke of storms, births, and the same protective presence. The last entry in the stack stopped her heart for a moment. July 4th, 1993. My granddaughter will need this one day. She does not yet know who she is, but the land will call her home. The others will laugh, but they will not understand. The keeper's gift never skips a generation. Her throat closed. You knew, she whispered. You knew everything. She looked back toward the cabin, a warmth stirring in her chest that felt like both grief and love. By the time she returned inside, the light had shifted, softer now, like dusk settling early. She set the papers on the table and sat beside them, staring at the map again. That's when she noticed something new. Faintly, near the cabin's outline, another mark had appeared on the parchment, a circle she swore hadn't been there before. She turned the paper under the light. The circle pulsed faintly, almost like it was inked in light instead of pen. Okay, she whispered. You're changing now? Why? Her voice echoed softly in the empty space. The cabin answered with a quiet groan, the sound of wood stretching. The lamp flickered once. Cassandra took a deep breath. All right, Grandma. You have my attention. That afternoon, she walked into town for supplies. The general store sat at the edge of a gravel road, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. As she entered, two older women near the counter stopped talking and stared. One of them leaned toward the other and whispered something Cassandra couldn't quite catch, but the tone told her enough. She forced a polite smile. Morning. The clerk, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, bagged her items without much talk. But as she turned to leave, he said, "You're staying up at Birch Hollow, aren't you?" Cassandra hesitated. "Yes. For a while." He nodded slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. "That place has history. Most folks around here don't go near it after dark." She frowned. "Why not?" He looked thoughtful before answering. "Old stories. About the women who lived there. They said the cabin watches over its own, and keeps away those who mean harm." She felt a chill run down her arms. "You believe that?" The man shrugged. "Belief isn't the same as knowing. But if you hear the wind singing at night, don't be afraid. It's just the land saying your name." She thanked him quietly and left. The women near the counter whispered again as the door shut behind her. Back on the road, the forest seemed thicker than before, shadows moving with the rhythm of the car's headlights. By the time she reached the cabin, dusk had deepened. She carried the bag of groceries inside, but paused when she saw something new. The candle on the dresser was burning again, though she hadn't lit it. Her pulse quickened. The flame flickered once, revealing a faint outline on the wall, the same circle she'd seen on the map. Cassandra stepped closer, tracing the shape with her fingertips. The surface was warm, vibrating gently. As soon as she touched it, a whisper brushed her ear, soft, almost tender. "When storms come, light the lamp by the window. Follow where its glow leads." She froze. The words were familiar. She'd read them earlier in her grandmother's journal. Her breath trembled. "I hear you," she whispered. "But what storm?" The walls settled again, quiet. The candle dimmed to a soft ember. Cassandra pressed her hand against her belly and whispered, "Whatever this is, please don't let it hurt us." The baby kicked twice, gentle, steady, almost like a promise. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the window, the lamp burning softly beside it. The forest beyond looked peaceful, yet her chest carried a weight she couldn't name. She thought of her grandmother's final words, "You inherited what you need." But she couldn't shake the fear that she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than inheritance. Something alive. Something waiting. That night, the first rumble of thunder rolled through the valley like distant drums. Cassandra sat near the window, reading through her grandmother's final pages, when the wind shifted sharply, rattling the shutters. The air grew heavy, the smell of rain creeping through the cracks. A single flash of lightning lit up the forest, revealing a wall of dark clouds rising above the ridges. Within minutes, the downpour began, steady, hard, relentless. She hurried to close the windows, but the storm was faster. Rain struck the glass like thrown pebbles, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that her breath misted. The lamp beside her flickered. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Then pain, low, deep, and unmistakable, spread through her body. "No, no, not now," she whispered, gripping the edge of the table. "Please, not yet." The contraction eased, but only for a moment. Another followed, sharper. Panic surged through her chest. She grabbed her phone from the counter. No bars. No signal. The screen glowed uselessly before dimming again. Her breathing quickened. She looked around the cabin, the safe, warm home that now felt far too small. The wind howled, shaking the roof beams. Something inside her said, "Light the lamp." She turned toward the window. The brass lamp that had glowed softly for nights was now dark. Cassandra fumbled for the switch. The flame sparked to life on its own, but it burned blue-white, colder and brighter than any fire she'd ever seen. The light pulsed once, then steadied. The glow spread across the room, washing over the walls until it revealed something new. Faint lines carved into the wood, forming the outline of a door she had never noticed before. The contractions came faster now. Sweat gathered on her forehead. "What do you want me to do?" she gasped. As if answering, the lamp's light brightened, focusing on the hidden door. She pressed her palm to the carvings. The wood felt warm beneath her touch. Slowly, it shifted, sliding open to reveal a narrow passage. The air that flowed out was cool and smelled of herbs and rain. With one hand pressed to her belly, she stepped inside. The small room beyond was dim but calm. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass jars, folded linens, and small wooden boxes. In the center stood a table draped with a white cloth, and upon it rested 3 objects: a candle, a worn leather book, and a silver bell. The candle lit itself as she entered. The flame was steady despite the storm that roared just beyond the walls. Cassandra's hands trembled as she opened the book. Inside were more names, the same lineage of women she had seen in the old journals. Each had written about storms, births, and the land's protection. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the last page. When the keeper's pain begins, the land listens. The bell calls help from the old paths. Do not fear the sound. It has never failed us. A sharp pain cut through her midsection, forcing her to her knees. Her breath hitched. Tears blurred her vision. She reached for the bell, its handle cold and smooth in her hand. The carvings along its side caught the candlelight, vines twisting into the same root-shaped symbol she'd seen before. Her voice shook. "If you can hear me, please, help me." She rang it once. The tone that followed wasn't loud, yet it filled the cabin completely, a pure, ringing note that lingered far longer than any metal should allow. It vibrated in her bones, spreading warmth through her chest. Outside, the storm's rhythm changed. The thunder softened, replaced by the sound of wind moving in circles around the cabin, almost like a song. Then, over the noise of rain and wind, came a knock at the front door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Cassandra froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Another contraction seized her, forcing her to grip the table for balance. The knocking came again. She stumbled back through the hidden passage, clutching her belly, and reached the main door. "Who's there?" she called out. A calm voice answered, clear through the storm. "A friend. Eleanor sent me." Her grandmother's name. Cassandra unlatched the door. Wind rushed in, cold and wet. On the porch stood an older woman wrapped in a gray cloak, her hair braided neatly, her face lined but gentle. She carried a worn satchel and a bundle of cloth. "Who are you?" Cassandra managed. The woman smiled. "My name's Maeve. Your grandmother called me years ago, told me I'd be needed again when the next keeper arrived." Cassandra stared, unable to speak. Maeve stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her cloak was completely dry despite the rain still hammering the roof. She moved with quiet certainty, her eyes taking in every corner of the cabin. "You're early," Maeve said softly, setting her satchel on the table. "But that's all right. The land's ready for you." Cassandra winced as another wave of pain hit. Maeve caught her arm, guiding her to the chair by the hearth. "Breathe," she instructed. "You're safe here. The cabin knows what to do." "The baby," Cassandra gasped. "Will come when it's meant to," Maeve finished gently. "Everything you need is already here." She opened her satchel, pulling out folded linens, herbs wrapped in cloth, a small pot, and a jar of clear oil. Cassandra watched, dazed, as the woman worked with calm precision, her hands moving as if guided by memory. Outside, lightning flashed. The sound of the wind softened to a steady hum, no longer violent but rhythmic, almost protective. Maeve lit a second candle and placed it near the window. "This will keep the storm from crossing the threshold," she said. "The light marks safe ground." Cassandra nodded weakly, trusting her completely, though she didn't understand why. Between contractions, she whispered, "You knew my grandmother?" Maeve's smile held a trace of sorrow. "We all did, in our own way. She was the last keeper before you. Strong woman. Stubborn too. But she loved this land." Her words wrapped around the room like warmth. Another contraction tore through Cassandra, sharp and undeniable. Maeve knelt beside her. "All right," she said softly. "It's time." The thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded far away. The candles stayed steady. Cassandra leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "I can't." "You can," Maeve said firmly. "You already are." Lightning flashed again, brighter than before, lighting the room in silver. For an instant, Cassandra saw faint shapes in the air, silhouettes of women standing in the corners, their outlines soft, their presence peaceful. When the light faded, they were gone, but the sense of calm they left behind remained. Maeve squeezed her hand. "They're watching. You're not alone." The cabin shuddered once, as if sealing itself from the storm. The wind outside howled, but inside, the air was still. The walls seemed to breathe with her, every pulse of pain matched by a soft vibration in the floor beneath her feet. Cassandra cried out as another contraction came, tears streaking her face. Maeve steadied her. "Breathe through it. The land listens." Outside, the rain slowed. The thunder faded into silence. A strange quiet filled the room, deep, complete, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Maeve looked up toward the ceiling and nodded slightly, as though hearing something Cassandra could not. "The storm's passing," she said gently. "You're safe now." Cassandra sagged against the chair, breathing hard, one hand pressed protectively over her belly. The baby moved beneath her palm, strong, alive, certain. She closed her eyes as warmth from the hearth spread through the room, wrapping her in light. The last sound she heard before sleep claimed her was Maeve's calm voice whispering, "Rest. The hardest part is over. The cabin will take care of the rest." Lightning tore across the sky, splitting the darkness in two. The thunder that followed shook the ground beneath the cabin. Inside, every beam and wall seemed alive with light. Faint patterns shimmered along the wood, lines that glowed in rhythm with Cassandra's heartbeat. Maeve guided her toward the bed, calm despite the chaos outside. "It's time," she said softly. "Don't fight it." Cassandra gripped the blanket. The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last. Sweat gathered on her brow. The air was hot and cold all at once, the room pulsing with the storm's rhythm. Between contractions, she gasped, "How did you know I'd need you?" Maeve's voice was steady. "Your grandmother told me long ago. Said the next keeper would come during a night like this. Said the land would call when it was ready." A flash of light illuminated Maeve's face, calm, focused, her gray eyes filled with something beyond understanding. "She called me when your mother was born in this same cabin," Maeve continued. "Now it's your turn." Cassandra's hand flew to the pendant around her neck, the silver locket her grandmother had given her years before. It glowed faintly, the light pulsing in time with the contractions. The fire steadied in the hearth, no longer flickering from the wind. The storm outside could rage all it wanted. Inside, Something greater had taken charge. Maeve moved quickly, setting a pot of water on the hearth, placing folded linens within reach. Her hands worked with confidence, as if she had done this 100 times before. Cassandra groaned, gripping the wooden headboard. "It's too soon," she whispered. Maeve placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're right on time. The land decides the hour, not us." The air trembled. Every window rattled once, then fell silent. A blue glow spread across the ceiling, faint symbols dancing above them like a soft veil of light. Maeve looked up and smiled. "They're watching." "Who?" Cassandra asked, breathless. "The women before you." Another contraction hit, sharper, longer. Cassandra cried out, tears spilling down her cheeks. The locket at her throat grew warmer until it shone white-hot. "You're doing well," Maeve said firmly. "Breathe, Cassandra. Let the pain move through you. You're not alone." Outside, wind swept through the trees, but instead of the harsh howl of a storm, it sounded like a song, low and rhythmic, carrying something that felt like comfort. Hours passed, though time lost its shape inside the cabin. Between each wave of pain, Cassandra saw glimpses she couldn't explain. Silhouettes of women moving through the light, their faces calm, their hands raised in blessing. She felt them, not as ghosts, but as presence, strong, silent, and near. When the next contraction came, she bore down with everything she had. Maeve whispered words Cassandra didn't recognize, her voice steady and full of power. The pendant flared again, light spilling over Cassandra's chest and onto the floor like water. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter. The air felt alive, humming softly in harmony with her cries. "It's coming," Maeve said quietly. "One more." Cassandra screamed, not in fear, but release. The sound joined the thunder outside, the two merging into one final roar that filled the valley. Then silence. For a moment, all she could hear was the rain easing against the roof. Then, a single cry. Maeve lifted the newborn gently, her hands steady despite the tremor in the air. "A girl," she whispered. "Strong lungs, bright eyes. Just like the others." Cassandra's chest shook with sobs, half relief, half awe. "She's okay." "She's perfect," Maeve said softly, wrapping the child in a linen cloth and laying her on Cassandra's chest. The moment the baby's skin touched hers, the storm broke completely. The clouds outside parted as sunlight spilled through cracks in the shutters. The glow in the cabin softened to gold. The rain stopped. The world exhaled. Cassandra held her daughter close. The baby's tiny fingers curled around the edge of her mother's locket, the silver still faintly warm. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the trees. In the soft mud around the cabin, wildflowers began to bloom, white, blue, and violet, bursting from the soil as if awakened by the child's first breath. Maeve moved quietly around the room, cleaning the space with practiced ease. She hummed a tune that seemed older than language. When she reached the small basin near the wall, she poured clear water into a ceramic bowl etched with old family emblems, roots, branches, and stars. She dipped a cloth into the water and turned to Cassandra. "The spring behind this house feeds the land," she said. "We use its water to welcome new life." Cassandra nodded weakly. Maeve touched the water to the baby's forehead. "Every keeper's daughter is blessed by the land," she whispered. "May she grow strong under its watch." The baby stirred but did not cry. The morning light grew brighter, stretching across the floor. The warmth in the room deepened, not just heat, but something alive, as if the cabin itself was breathing slower now, at peace. Maeve wrapped the baby again and handed her back to Cassandra. "You'll both rest now," she said softly. "The land is calm. It will guard you until you wake." Cassandra tried to speak, to ask how Maeve knew all this, but exhaustion overtook her. Her eyes fluttered closed. She felt the weight of her daughter on her chest, the small heartbeat steady and sure. The last thing she saw before sleep was Maeve standing in the doorway, her gray cloak catching the first light of dawn. "Thank you," Cassandra whispered. Maeve smiled gently. "Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother. She's the reason you're home." As Cassandra drifted into sleep, Maeve turned once toward the window. The forest outside shimmered faintly, leaves trembling in a wind that carried no sound. When Cassandra finally woke again, hours later, the storm had vanished, leaving behind clear skies and sunlight streaming through the windows. The air smelled of fresh earth and blooming flowers. The fire still burned low, steady and warm. Her daughter slept peacefully beside her. Cassandra sat up slowly, every muscle aching, but her heart full. The pendant still glowed faintly against her skin, and for the first time, she noticed the symbol etched into its back, a circle crossed with roots. The same mark carved into the lamp, the quilt, and the bell. She smiled softly. "You've been here all along." When Cassandra opened her eyes again, the sunlight had changed. It poured through the windows in gentle stripes, falling across the wooden floor. The storm had left the world clean and new. The air smelled of rain, lavender, and something sweet, like wild honey drifting from the woods. The baby slept soundly beside her, her tiny chest rising and falling with quiet rhythm. Cassandra touched her daughter's hand, amazed at the smallness of it, the warmth. The memory of pain was already fading, replaced by something far stronger, peace. She turned her head toward the chair near the bed. Maeve's gray cloak hung there, folded neatly, but the woman herself was gone. "Maeve!" Cassandra called softly. No answer. The cabin was still. On the table, where Maeve's satchel had been, lay a single folded note. Cassandra reached for it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was elegant and firm. "The cabin watches over its own. Rest when you can. Trust what wakes within you. M." Cassandra let out a slow breath. "You really were real, weren't you?" she whispered. She stood carefully, holding the baby close, and stepped toward the window. The forest beyond had changed. What had been wild and tangled now seemed touched by order, vines climbing neatly around tree trunks, patches of color spreading where before there had been only dirt. Outside the cabin, the earth was alive. Fresh blossoms lined the pathway. Fruit trees she had never planted stood in full bloom, their petals scattering in the wind like snow. Cassandra stepped out onto the porch. The world was golden, the air soft. She could hear the faint trickle of water from the spring behind the cabin. A small patch of grass beside the porch had transformed into a garden overnight. Rows of herbs, sprigs of mint and sage, young vegetables breaking through the soil. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "You inherited what you need." She smiled faintly. "I get it now." The baby stirred and opened her eyes, the same deep blue with flecks of gold she'd noticed before. For a heartbeat, Cassandra could swear the air around them pulsed with light again. The forest seemed to bow in quiet greeting. She walked slowly down the steps, her bare feet sinking into damp grass. Every part of the land felt different, aware, awake, breathing with her. A hawk circled above, letting out a single cry before soaring toward the ridge. In the distance, she saw sunlight bouncing off the stream. Everything moved with quiet harmony, as if the storm had washed away every trace of chaos. She whispered to her daughter, You were born into something sacred. This is yours as much as it's mine." Back inside, she noticed the fire had rekindled itself. The hearthstone glowed faintly, marked with the same pattern of roots and circles. A warmth spread through her body as she stood there, not just physical heat, but connection. Cassandra laid her daughter in the cradle and began to tidy the space. Each item seemed to belong exactly where it was, as though someone had already arranged it long before she arrived. The small jars of herbs, the silver bell on the mantel, the journals stacked neatly beside the hearth. She ran her hand along the shelves, stopping at a wooden box she hadn't opened before. Inside lay the final page of her grandmother's letter. "When they laugh, let them. The land remembers truth when others forget. You are the new keeper. Protect it well." Her eyes blurred as she read the words again and again. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. The baby let out a soft coo, the sound light and sure. Cassandra turned, smiling through her tears. "I was so scared," she said quietly. "But maybe fear was part of it. Maybe that's how the land tests you, to see if you'll stay." The wind moved gently through the open window, carrying the scent of birch leaves. She sat on the floor beside the cradle, resting her hand on the smooth wood. The same phrase carved into the side caught her eye again. "For the next keeper." Cassandra traced the letters. "You knew I'd find this, Grandma. You knew I'd come back when I had nowhere else." She looked around the cabin. What once felt like a stranger's house now pulsed with familiarity. Every groove in the wood, every tool on the shelf, every quiet hum of life. She realized she hadn't inherited a home. She'd inherited a promise. Her gaze fell to the silver bell again. Its surface glinted softly in the firelight. She picked it up, holding it close to her ear. The faintest sound, a tone that wasn't quite a ring but a whisper, drifted through her mind. "You're not alone." Tears spilled down her cheeks, though she was smiling. "I know," she murmured. As evening settled, the light outside turned amber. She stepped to the doorway once more, her daughter resting against her shoulder. The sky stretched clear above the ridges. Not a single cloud remained. In that golden calm, Cassandra understood the weight of everything that had happened, the laughter of her cousins, the loneliness, the fear. None of it mattered now. The cabin had chosen her. The land had claimed her. She whispered to her child, "You'll grow up knowing this place, hearing its voice in the wind. You'll never have to wonder where you belong." The baby stirred softly, as if in agreement. Cassandra smiled. "You're my beginning and her ending, all in one." She stayed on the porch until the sun dipped low behind the hills. The world shifted from gold to rose, and the birches cast long shadows across the clearing. The earth under her feet felt warm, almost like a heartbeat. Before returning inside, she glanced once more at the trees. The air shimmered faintly, a subtle light winding between the branches. It wasn't frightening. It was familiar, like the presence she'd felt during the storm. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Grandma. I understand now." The forest answered with a soft rush of wind that wrapped around her like an embrace. Inside, the fire cracked gently, the flames steady and low. Cassandra laid her daughter in the cradle again, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, little keeper." For the first time in months, Cassandra felt no fear of tomorrow, only calm. The ache of abandonment had turned into strength. What once felt like loss now felt like destiny. She looked at the cabin one last time before closing her eyes. It was glowing softly again, every line in its walls alive with quiet light. The land was breathing with her. It had been 3 weeks since the storm. The forest was thick with color, every blade of grass sharp and alive. Morning mist rolled through the hollow like slow-moving breath, and the cabin, once gray and forgotten, now glowed with quiet strength. Cassandra had settled into a rhythm that felt older than memory. She rose at dawn, fed her daughter, and walked the boundary of the property with bare feet, feeling the land pulse beneath her steps. She learned which flowers opened at sunrise, which herbs sang faintly when brushed by her hand. The place was never silent now. It whispered in its own language, the hum of bees, the trickle of the stream, the steady crackle of life continuing. Sometimes, in the soft light of morning, she thought she saw her grandmother's outline among the birches. Always smiling, always watching. But peace rarely goes unnoticed. One afternoon, the sound of engines shattered the quiet. Cassandra's chest tightened. No one ever came this deep into Birch Hollow. She stepped onto the porch, shielding her eyes as 3 dark cars crawled up the muddy path. The smell of exhaust and expensive perfume carried through the wind. Her cousins had arrived. The car doors opened in sequence. Beatrice stepped out first, wrapped in her fur-trimmed coat, heels sinking into the earth. 2 of the men carried umbrellas, though the sky was clear. "Well, look who decided to make something of this dump," Beatrice said, her voice slick with forced cheer. "Word travels fast. People say you've been renovating." Cassandra said nothing. She shifted her baby in her arms and watched as the others stepped out, faces painted with surprise and unease. The cabin no longer looked like the ruin they remembered. Flowers bloomed in patterns across the clearing, the wood gleamed with a soft sheen, and sunlight seemed to linger a little longer on the roof. Beatrice forced a laugh. "You always did like being dramatic. So, what's your secret? Finally get yourself a handyman." Cassandra looked at her, calm and unreadable. "No," she said simply. "Just time. And care." The words hung in the air. A breeze stirred the trees behind her, scattering petals across the porch. The cousins exchanged quick glances. "Well," one of the men said, clearing his throat, "looks like you got lucky. The rest of us had to pay for contractors. Maybe we should have kept the cabin after all." Beatrice ran a manicured hand along the railing, then pulled back as if the wood burned. "Strange," she murmured. "It feels warm." "It remembers who touches it," Cassandra replied softly. Beatrice frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before Cassandra could answer, a hush fell across the clearing. The birds had gone silent. The wind stilled. Even the leaves seemed to listen. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Beatrice forced another laugh, this one thinner than before. "You've really gone native, haven't you? Playing forest queen in your little fairy cottage." Cassandra stepped forward, holding her daughter close. Her eyes, once uncertain and tired, now carried something ancient, something steady. "It's not about crowns or magic," she said. "It's about belonging. Something you wouldn't understand." Beatrice's smile faltered. "Careful, cousin. You sound just like her." "I know," Cassandra said. "That's the point." Behind her, the cabin door creaked open slightly, though no one had touched it. A soft gust of wind brushed past Cassandra's hair, carrying the faint scent of cedar and rain. Her daughter stirred, eyes blinking open. The air shifted again, gentle but commanding. The cousins stepped back instinctively. For the first time, their confidence broke. "Maybe we should go," one of them muttered. Beatrice glared at him. "Don't be ridiculous. It's just," She stopped mid-sentence. A faint shimmer danced across the garden, light bending where sunlight met shadow. The flowers turned their heads toward Cassandra as if greeting her. Beatrice's voice cracked. What is this?" Cassandra looked around them, her voice calm and even. "It's home remembering itself." Beatrice took another step back. "You're scaring me." "No," Cassandra said softly. "You're scared because you never looked closely enough. You only saw what you could take, never what was meant to be kept." For a long moment, no one moved. The wind returned, gentle now, brushing through the birches. The forest resumed its song, leaves whispering, birds calling again. Cassandra turned, walking toward the door. "You can stay for tea if you want," she said without looking back. "But the cabin decides who it welcomes." Beatrice's lips parted, but no words came. She looked around once more, unsettled by the quiet intelligence of the place. The sunlight seemed to shift with her movements, following Cassandra instead. Finally, Beatrice lifted her chin. "Enjoy your fairy tale," she said sharply. "You'll get bored soon enough. People always do." Cassandra paused in the doorway and glanced over her shoulder. Her tone was gentle, but her words carried weight. "You can't get bored of what you're part of." Beatrice opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. There was nothing left to say. The cars started one by one, their engines breaking the spell for a moment. Mud splattered under the tires as they reversed down the path. Cassandra watched until the forest swallowed them whole. Only then did she exhale. The air seemed to lighten again, the trees leaning softly as if sighing with relief. She turned back inside, the baby resting peacefully in her arms. The door closed on its own, the latch settling into place with a quiet click. The cabin seemed to hum in approval. The fire in the hearth flickered brighter, sending a warm glow through the room. Cassandra smiled faintly. "They'll never understand," she whispered to her daughter. "But that's all right. Understanding isn't required to respect something sacred." She walked to the window and looked out at the clearing. The flowers were swaying again, small bursts of color against the deep green. Sunlight spilled over everything, touching the cabin walls with golden warmth. Her daughter stirred, tiny fingers curling around Cassandra's necklace. "You feel it too, don't you?" Cassandra whispered. "This is ours. It always was." The baby gave a soft coo, and Cassandra laughed quietly, not out of joy or sadness, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when everything finally makes sense. Outside, a hawk called from the ridge. The forest answered in rustling harmony. Cassandra pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead and whispered, "We're home." The world outside glowed brighter, and the cabin breathed once more, steady, alive, listening. Night settled softly over Birch Hollow. The forest exhaled a quiet rhythm, a lullaby of wind through leaves and crickets singing beneath the porch. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting gold light over the wooden walls. Cassandra sat by the window, her daughter asleep in her arms. The blue lamp on the sill glowed faintly, its flame steady and calm. She could see the birch trees outside swaying gently, their white trunks gleaming under the moon. It was peaceful, not the empty silence she'd once feared, but a living stillness that felt protective. Every creak, every sigh of wood was the cabin breathing with her, steady and kind. She brushed her thumb over the baby's cheek. The child's breathing was light and even. Cassandra smiled, her eyes warm with quiet wonder. "This is what she wanted for me," she whispered. "Not riches, not escape. Just this, peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. The thought made her heart ache in a good way. She looked around the cabin, the cradle near the hearth, the journals stacked neatly, the herbs hanging by the window. Everything in its place, everything touched by care. On the table lay an old book bound in worn leather. The family grimoire. She had found it hidden beneath the floorboards earlier that day, wrapped in linen. The edges were frayed, but the ink was still clear. She turned the pages slowly. Each entry carried a name. Generations of women who had lived, loved, and kept the land alive. Some pages were written in looping cursive, others in firm block letters, but every line held the same truth. We serve the land, and the land serves us. Cassandra reached the last blank page and picked up her pen. The lamp flickered once, then steadied, its light guiding her hand. She wrote carefully, her words simple and true. The land chose us again. I choose it in return. When she finished, she closed the book and laid her palm over its cover. The warmth that pulsed beneath her hand wasn't imagination. It was acknowledgement, a bond sealed in quiet promise. The baby stirred, and Cassandra rocked her gently. You'll add your name one day too, she whispered. When you're ready. Outside, the wind brushed through the birches, their leaves catching the moonlight like silver. The forest hummed softly in answer. Cassandra rose and walked toward the door. She opened it just wide enough to let the night air in. The scent of damp earth filled the room, mixed with the sweetness of blooming flowers. She looked out over the clearing. The garden glowed faintly in the moonlight, herbs and blossoms swaying as though greeting her. Fireflies moved through the air in slow patterns, lighting the edges of the path. This place, she said quietly, it gives back more than it takes. Her words seemed to linger, carried by the wind. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice again. When they laugh, let them. The land remembers truth when others forget. Cassandra smiled through a tear. They laughed, she said softly. But you gave me everything that mattered. She stepped back inside and closed the door, the latch clicking into place like a heartbeat. The fire flickered, sending golden ripples across the walls. The cabin felt smaller now, but not confined, just close, like an embrace. She placed the baby in her cradle, covering her with the quilt her grandmother had sewn years ago. The blue lamp continued to glow beside them, steady as a star. Cassandra sat in the chair by the window again, folding her arms and letting her head rest back. She didn't feel tired, just full of gratitude, full of life. Outside, the moon rose higher. The trees swayed gently, as though listening to something only they could hear. Inside, the baby gave a soft sigh in her sleep. The sound made Cassandra smile. She whispered, "You'll never have to wonder where you belong." The cabin responded with a quiet hum, a low, soothing note that vibrated through the floorboards. The light from the lamp brightened for just a moment, washing the room in gentle blue. Cassandra closed her eyes, and in that silence she felt everything. Her grandmother's hands, the strength of the women before her, the steady pulse of the land beneath her feet. It was as if generations breathed through her. She exhaled slowly. The past no longer hurt. The future no longer frightened her. Somewhere outside, a night bird called once. Its song carried far into the trees. The forest seemed to answer with rustling leaves. Cassandra looked up at the ceiling beams, tracing the carved symbols with her eyes, the same markings that had glowed during the storm. She finally understood them. They weren't warnings or secrets. They were blessings. She whispered a final thank you to the house, to the land, to the bloodline that had led her here. A soft knock of branches brushed the window, like a hand against glass. The baby stirred but did not wake. The blue lamp steadied again, its light wrapping them both in calm. Cassandra leaned forward and kissed her daughter's forehead. "You're safe," she murmured. "Always." The words felt larger than a promise. They felt eternal. She stood and looked outside one last time before sleep. The clearing shimmered faintly under the moon, the birch trees bending as if in slow prayer. The air itself seemed to glow, not bright, but alive, like breath turned to light. The cabin pulsed once more, the sound deep and gentle, like a heart. Cassandra smiled. "It's listening," she whispered. "It always listens." The night deepened. The lamp burned softly. The cradle creaked once as the baby shifted, then stilled again. For a long moment, nothing moved except the light. It spread through the room in quiet waves, touching the journals, the walls, the windowpane. And when it reached Cassandra's face, her eyes closed at last, not from exhaustion but peace. The cabin exhaled with her. Outside, dawn began to rise over the valley. Mist rolled through the hollow, and the first light of morning brushed across the trees. A new day had begun, carrying the same calm rhythm as the last. The land, the keeper, and the child, all breathing in harmony. A story complete, yet beginning again. What would you do if the world laughed at your inheritance, and it turned out to be your destiny? Tell us where you're watching from, subscribe for more powerful stories, and join us tomorrow. The next story might just change the way you see inheritance, love, and legacy forever.